This week's guests are Australian dream pop and slowcore band Karen and Steve from the brilliant Heligoland. How are you guys?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having us on your show.
Yeah, no trouble. And obviously, the name Heligoland, are we talking Massive Attack or are we talking German Island?
German Island. This was back in 1999 when we formed.
Yeah.
And this was one of the names that we had to call ourselves. We had like 3 different names. That was one of them. And that just felt like the good name for a place far away to help describe our music. And since then, there's obviously been the Massive Attack record. There's been a book as well.
There's a few others. You get a few variations on the spelling because it's called Helgoland these days rather than Heligoland because it's all German again now. And there's a few of those. And the Massive Attack one was kind of interesting though because I can't tell you how many people send us emails and texts and stuff. It's like, have you seen the new Massive Attack album? And I was like, there goes our Google ranking. That's going to plummet.
Yeah, so I found it interesting like, when I was looking up, and I sort of got lost for 20 minutes watching a documentary about the German island and the history of that. And I was like, no, I'm supposed to be researching the band.
It's quite a strange history. I was looking at a video the other night about the British bombing it to almost out of existence after the war. And the devastation is just astounding. I actually went there it was about 2003. I was in Europe and I caught the ferry out there for the day. And it's a strange little island. It's just it's like someone's just dropped it in the middle of the North Sea. And you have this sort of big plateau on top, which still has all the craters from the bombs. And then down at the bottom, there's this sort of little touristy area and some nice beaches. But you sort of stand on top and look out and it's just sea everywhere. You feel like you're sort of in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, like a proper island.
Yeah. I can't imagine. I mean, the day I was out there, it was beautiful and sunny and calm, but I can't begin to imagine what it's like out there in the middle of a storm. It must be kind of spectacular and sort of moderately terrifying at the same time.
And for anyone that hasn't heard it, how would you describe your music? Because obviously there's genres associated with it, but if you don't know what those genres mean, how would you guys describe it?
Well, I guess the sort of genres people put us in mostly are things like dream pop, slowcore, a little bit shoegaze, things like that. I mean, it's sort of dreamy.
Yeah. We've never really felt like we fit into a particular genre, to be honest.
I feel like we fall slightly between some of these. Like there's a bit of dream pop, there's maybe a bit of slowcore, there's a little bit of shoegaze, but not in the sort of
and there was some post rock at the start too when we first started. A little bit. So
it's sort of somewhere between all those sorts of things. I guess it's sort of dreamy kind of indie guitar rock with sort of, lovely female vocals, I guess is a good way to describe it.
But I mean, this is one thing I'm really bad at when people ask me. I'm just like, I don't know. I just say it's kind of dreamy. Like I just go really vague because I don't know. How do you? It's like if someone says, describe yourself.
Yeah.
You suddenly feel really self-conscious, and you don't want to seem like a complete tosser, but you also don't want to, just go, it's just like sounds and voices.
It's hard to find the happy medium between sounding like an egomaniac and then just saying it's dreadful,
So you just kind of throw a few genres out there. But dream pop is probably the main one because people get the idea a little bit if they've heard of that genre.
Yeah, and it kind of conjures up an image as well if you don't really know dream pop, but you sort of know what that means just by hearing it, don't you?
Yeah,
it's probably not a bad description. I mean, that's the one I think maybe we're closest to. I mean, the sort of bands we get compared to, that feels maybe, I mean, slowcore to me, I think maybe in the early days we're probably a bit more in that direction, things like early low perhaps, maybe a bit more like that. These days I think we're probably closer to dream pop, but I mean, it's sort of, a lot of this stuff is quite subjective. I mean, you read one review says one thing, someone else says something else, and it's it's all in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah,
I think.
Exactly. Depends what references someone has is coming from as well. Like sometimes people say you sound like a particular band, and you're like, what? How the hell would they think that? But that's what they listen to, so that's all they've got to, to reflect.
Yeah, I've definitely offended some musicians in the past by, in my head, like a positive comparison to someone. They've gone, I don't sound like that person at all.
Well, that sort of begs the question, what you're going to compare us to.
Well, it depends what you're listening to.
Exactly.
That's the thing.
The new album, This Quiet Fire, it's your first LP for about 10 years, isn't it? But you've done lots of EPs. I mean, there's a couple up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So do you, when you sort of decide you're working on something, is it a conscious decision that this is going to be an EP, this is going to be an LP, or does that sort of happen during the process?
I would say yes.
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. The series of EPs that we did 3 EPs, and that sort of started by accident. And we had a lot of fun doing the first one, so we did another one. And then we thought we'd do a trilogy, so we did one more. And then by which point, sort of 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years had elapsed since the last album. So we thought we should probably really do another album.
Mm.
But I think when you start an album, when we've done it, because this is about our 4th, I think, and each time we've sort of approached it as this is going to be an album.
Yeah.
Because we never really seem to have many tracks left over. We always seem to do maybe 10 and maybe one extra or something. There's rarely much left over. But the EPs were kind of an accidental sort of journey where we went off down into the countryside to do what we thought was going to be a week of rehearsal, but the drummer couldn't make it, and we made the first EP, which is very kind of minimal and ambient. And we had so much fun making it, we found another place to go in the countryside to do a second one, which is Sanan. And then we had such a good time doing that. We found another place to do a third one, but the second one was quite busy to record. So we thought we'd write the songs before we went to the location for the third one. And so that was a bit complicated. But after we did all that, we thought we should probably make an album here.
Yeah. But we didn't go, we'll do 3 EPs. It's just you do one. It's like, that works. Let's do that thing again where we go away somewhere and write something.
That was sort of an experience as well. We're sort of going somewhere for a week with nothing prepared and then writing something. That was the first 2. Yeah. The third one we prepared a bit more. So that was sort of kind of an accidental journey. And we went to different places around the country to record them too, which made it a bit more fun. But this one, it was like, okay, we need to do an album.
We were ready to do an album.
Yeah, it's been a while. We should probably get it together and actually do a collection of songs.
Yeah. Yeah. It was time.
Obviously, you spoke about traveling to the French countryside because you're an Australian band, but you're based in Paris. Do you feel like it influences you differently living in France as to when you were in Australia, or is the environment changed how you make music or how you think about music?
I think,
I'm sure it has an effect. I think it's probably the most pronounced on the EPs because I think they kind of sound to me a bit like where they were recorded. The first one was recorded in a forest at the bottom of the Pyrenees in a sort of bar/venue, and it's kind of very tranquil and very calm. The second one was recorded out in sort of farming, dairy area. It sounds very sort of pastoral. And the third one was recorded in kind of a converted sort of lighthouse semaphore thing looking out over the sea. And that one feels a bit more sort of...
with a crazy wind outside. So that one feels
it feels
stronger.
A bit more sort of windswept. So I think it has... I mean, the albums, it's a bit harder to pinpoint for me. I think the first album, the previous album we did was All Your Ships, and we wrote sort of about a third of that in Melbourne before we left and then the rest here. And this one we wrote sort of in... sort of batches. We did 2/3 of it, then we came back later and Karen wrote another third of it. So it's sort of, I'm sure there's an influence in there somewhere, but I find it a little hard to pinpoint. What about, I don't know, lyrically maybe? Or?
Totally. Like it's all your perspective, and when you live in another country, there's how do I describe it? There's so many more things to look at and taste and see, and you're more aware of, if that makes sense. So there's more creative stimulation because it's, I don't know, you've got that kind of childlike feeling, and it hasn't really gone away. So I think you're just constantly absorbing stuff, and it's coming out subconsciously somehow in the music, it's kind of being reflected back. So I feel like it's maybe a bit more living in France has maybe made us a bit more open-minded as well, because Australia is very isolated. So there's a big difference moving from Australia to France in how you see the world and how you see everything, because you're just so kind of stuck when you're so far away in Australia.
I suppose, do you experience the seasons more in France than you would back in Australia? Because I don't know if that's my prejudice of assuming that it's just always hot in Australia.
It's always weird. I think the weird thing is actually because the fact that it's reversed. Christmas is freezing cold. You're not sort of firing up a barbecue. Sort of cracking open a cold beer. That's what always gets me. But, I mean, the seasons are a bit different. I grew up in Tasmania, which is probably the climate's sort of not super different. It's sort of kind of longish grey winter, sort of milder summer. I feel like it's getting hot here in the time we've been living here. It's been getting warmer in the summer. But it's sort of reversed, which is always weird. So often, particularly like my birthday, for example, is always in the hot part of the year. Now it's in the really cold part of the year. Which is weird.
But I do like the really long winters, because it's long summers in Australia, and that just kills you. Like that's just that's murder, especially when there's a heat wave. So I do not miss that at all. But I love the long winters and the spring. But I think definitely you're more observant, because you've always got that memory of when you were a child and growing up of what the seasons are normally like. So
it's interesting. It's like I completely agree with, like, when you're somewhere else absorbing things more. It's like I always say, like, I went to Rome when it was absolutely pouring down with rain, but I didn't care because I was in Rome. Like, if I'd have been back in England, I'd have been like, I'm not going out in that weather. But because you're somewhere else, you're like, who cares? I get to look at all this beautiful stuff.
But that's the beauty about, like, when we went away to record the EPs, because you can record stuff at home, but when you physically take yourself somewhere else, I swear, like, you have different thoughts. You approach everything differently. There's like this shift that happens, so that you do things differently, and it's good. So
I suppose even then to the fact of, like, just setting up your equipment somewhere else, if you're used to having it set up in a certain way when you're at home, when you've gone somewhere else, it might be just having something slightly different, place somewhere different. Or
it's absolutely right. I think when we tried to do each of the last few records, we always tried to find something slightly different about the way we got started, to sort of try and take us somewhere else. And I think with the new album, we tried a couple of different approaches, using, like, sort of playing over beats and things, and sort of synth drones and stuff, just to try and, because we hadn't done it before, just see if we could take the song somewhere a bit different. So, you can sort of go somewhere and move things around. Then you sort of try and throw in a few other elements. Sometimes it can sort of lead you to some interesting kind of places.
Yeah. And so how do you go about the making the music? Is it like you sit down together and work on something, or will one of you bring an idea and then you both expand on it? Or
historically, it's always been the former. The band will be in a room and we just jam and play, and you sort of fall towards each other and you end up on something, and you say, "Oh, that sounds kind of interesting. Where does that go? Let's do that a few more times," and sort of one thing leads to another. And that was the way pretty much all our records were written. I think the new albums, the songs, Karen did a bit of an exception because she just wrote those. There's 3 that were her, but for the most part, it's all very much like that. It's all just people in a room playing together, just listening. And after a while, you sort of happen across something, someone does something, and start reacting. And let's do that for a while. Let's try and find another bit to put with that. And it sort of unfolds that way. I think that's fair.
That's fair. But, like, it starts as like a jam, and then you find something and you keep going. It's like, let's do this a bit, change this chord, do that. But it's kind of this layering. And then I know for the vocals, like, I'll be playing, guitar or whatever, and then I'll just be making noises, like just random stuff, because I don't know what the song's about yet. I don't know what it is, but singing. And then for me, like, the vocals is always, or the lyrics is always the very last thing, but as long as I've got the melody there, that's okay. But it's just getting the structure. But it always comes from the music. It's not, I never come in with like a vocal or a lyric. It's like the music comes first.
Yeah. This album's produced by Robin Guthrie, and you've worked with him before, haven't you?
Yeah, all the stuff we've done since we've been in Europe.
Since 2007.
Yeah, we did the previous album, All Your Ships Are White, we did with him. That was the first time we worked with him. And then with the EPs, we recorded each of those, the different locations, and then took them to him, and he mixed them. And this one, he was involved a bit more in sort of the songwriting stage. We sort of came in a bit earlier to have a listen, see where it was all going. And then he sort of produced and mixed this one. So it's been a little bit different depending on the recording.
Yeah.
But this is the fifth one we've done.
Yeah. Oh, okay. But so obviously you enjoy working with him, and he has sort of, a well-respected place within the sort of genres that you guys are working with.
He's just awesome too.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun to work with. But I mean, he kind of invented this sort of branch of music, sort of largely, sort of foundational figure in that sort of style, I guess you could call it, sort of, however you might want to label it. But he's amazing to work with as a producer, so much sort of experience and knowledge. And, if you just have an idea for a sound or something, you can just sort of whip it up, in seconds. And he also has a very clear idea of how things sort of fit together in a mix, which is often hard when you're working on a song to sort of get a sense of how it all fits. But he usually has sort of the big picture in mind. He's like a film director. He can sort of see the shot, and sort of guy behind the camera who's sort of looking can see how everything sort of, fits together.
And the artwork for the new album is beautiful, especially the vinyl with the cutout. There you go. How important to you guys is the artwork of a project? Is that a big thing for you, or something you give off to somebody else? Or
this particular artwork, because the EPs were done by Damien. He did those 3 series, so they fitted together. But for the album, I wanted this Argentinian designer to do it, and I wanted something. I just said to her, I just want something strong, feminine, and a little bit abstract. And she, this was one of the designs that she came up with, and I just love that it's very it stands out.
Yeah.
And it's very abstract. It's like you have that moment where you're like, what is it? You have to kind of think about that. So I like that. I like it.
I think it works very well with the title as well. I mean, she sent us a PDF with heaps and heaps of ideas, and this was on about page 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And I think the first time I saw it, I was like, that's the one. Yeah. Because to me, the title, This Quiet Fire, is sort of speaking about internal kind of qualities and feelings, and this particular image somehow, for me anyway, sort of, hints at what's happening within, beneath the surface. So it sort of seems to work quite well from that point of view. And it's also really quite striking visually too.
And I love that ambiguity that people could just kind of put onto it, whatever they want.
Yeah. It's definitely, like you say, it's very striking. It's one of those, there's certain album covers when you see them, you're like, I'd probably buy that even if I didn't know what it was. There's certain records where you're like,
to hear what it sounds like.
It's a very strong image. Are there any plans to tour the album when the world's a bit more normal?
It seems playing concerts seems like such a faraway prospect at the moment. Everything's been stopped for so long. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens when things eventually start opening up. I was thinking about this earlier, and it seems like there's just this huge glut of concerts because everyone's been sort of pushing all their stuff back. And I was sort of wondering how this is all going to work. It's going to be a sort of tidal wave of tours and concerts all at once and festivals. So I don't know. We'll see in due course, I think. Like I say, it just seems a bit hard to imagine. Everything's been shut down for so long and everything's been sort of stuck. Well, I guess we'll wait and see what happens when things open up again.
Yeah.
That would be nice, but we just have to see.
Yeah.
Everyone's in the same boat.
Yeah, you would like to that, like if the possibility was there, you would definitely.
If we could find a way to do it, sort of present it in the right way, and yes, I mean when we first came to Europe, we used to tour a lot in some quite unusual sort of places. I think it'd be nice to go out and play some shows again. Maybe not quite with that sort of level of intensity we had back then, but just do a few shows here and there would be nice, We'll see where it leads,
Yeah.
Obviously, this record you've sort of released independently, haven't you? And is that a big, like a sort of conscious choice for you that you wanted to support yourself, or present this yourself?
More like necessity, I think.
I think we're just a bit over shopping things to label. It's like, let's just put it out ourselves. Then we get to do what we want. And
with the last record, the last album, we tried, sending that to all sorts of people, and it took a very long time, and you're continually waiting and hearing back from people, and sometimes you have a little bit of a sniff or something, so you wait, and the whole thing just got delayed so much, and in the end, no one sort of was jumping up and down to put it out, and so we ended up putting out that album ourselves, and then we did all the EPs ourselves, and because our EPs, we didn't really sort of try and shop them around. I don't think anyone would have really been that excited by an EP. And it came time to do this album, and it's just like, let's just release it. It took quite a while to make.
And it's easy enough to do it through Bandcamp as well. And, once you figure out how to get everything manufactured, it's, it's like, okay, we can just, it's much easier. We don't have to wait around for anyone.
Yeah, the mechanics of getting the record made because we did this one in cassette, LP and CD, the mechanics of getting the thing sort of manufactured, not too hard. Promotion's always difficult, but there's tools around, whether it's social media or Bandcamp, to actually sell it yourselves these days. And I mean, I know I said it was a necessity, but the other thing is it does put you in kind of much closer contact with your listeners, which is quite interesting. It's kind of cool to meet some of the people, virtually, who buy the records and sort of hear what they have to say. That's often quite sort of reassuring, might not be the word, sometimes quite touching to hear people hear their feedback and their thoughts directly, because often if you sell it in a record store, you have no idea who's buying it, but sometimes, because Karen does all the sort of Bandcamp stuff,
I love talking with people.
She'll pass me on some comments or someone's buying. It's often really interesting to hear what people think, just their sort of impressions. But it's often quite touching to hear sort of people's stories about, this record, I found it quite meaningful for this reason or whatever. So that's really quite nice too. So, I mean, it's not without its, self-releasing is not without its sort of advantages. And I think that's a big one for me. You probably agree, yeah? Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, as far as promotion goes, I just send it off to little blogs and stuff, and that's about it, because I kind of figure people will find it if they've heard about it or whatever. But it's just a lot easier and less stressful to just kind of do it that way instead of worrying about shopping it around to labels. I think I don't know, we're just a bit over that. It's like, I don't have the energy. I just want to make music.
I mean, by the same token, if someone nice came along and said they want to work with us, we'd be happy to work with them too. I mean, it's not sort of an exclusive thing, but it's just sort of necessity at one point led us to sort of do things a certain way, and we've sort of continued along that route. Yeah. But, I mean, it's working okay, I guess,
Yeah, definitely. I think the last two musician like bands that I've had on are both independent bands, and for the reason of it's easier than, like you say, shopping and stuff around, and just for the control of it, that there's no one saying, you're not allowed that album, that artwork, or you're not, these songs aren't going to be on there. It's like you're totally in control of it.
Yeah, I think I remember I was watching an interview with Ben and Rob, and I think you were talking about this. I think I remember hearing that. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You have sort of complete freedom. If you want to do a cover which doesn't actually have the album title on it anywhere, for example, it's like, okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
I think in the past we might have worked with small labels sort of in the past, and sometimes, you had some strange kind of,
like changing the song orders, and it's like, why? Like,
there's a French label we released on years ago, and the guy insisted on having the songs in an order for the French audience, and I was like, really? I was like,
and looking back now, it's
do they
just
have different ears or something?
Like,
I was like, that's kind of strange.
There's two different versions.
Yeah, so you end up with some funny kind of situations sometimes. But I mean, if you're going to work with people, you have to accept this sort of give or take. But if it's just yourself, you can just put it in the order you want. You can have the artwork you want. You can, like we made a cassette for this record, just because it was fun to do, and they look really cool, and you could do like 50 of them. So it's like we grew up with cassettes, so it was just kind of fun. So you have a lot more freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there places that people can buy the record from that benefits you more? Because obviously people can listen to it on Spotify and Amazon and stuff, but are there certain places to buy it from that help you guys out more?
Oh, probably Bandcamp, I would say, is sort of the number one.
Yeah.
That's dealing direct with us. So if you buy from Bandcamp, we're the ones putting it in a mailer. Karen, I should say.
You get an extra postcard if you buy it from us.
That was perfectly on cue, wasn't it?
Because we've always had this thing of having postcards for each release. Yeah. So I always put it in. Yay!
Oh yeah. Oh, there's one. Yeah, there's one of those. Yeah. So I mean, if you buy through Bandcamp, it's us putting it in the post packs and taking it to the post office and all that sort of stuff. So that one's. But I mean, the tricky thing with this one is we did vinyl, which we'd never done an LP before. We did some 7 inches about 20 years ago, but we'd never done an LP. And it's quite expensive to post from France to the US. So we found somewhere in the UK you can buy it from Norman, you can get it in the US from Darla, and we get it in Australia. That was even worse, the postage to Australia.
Yeah, I shipped it to this awesome record shop in Melbourne, where we used to live, because that was crazy expensive to post it individually to people who ordered it. So
we tried to find a solution for the vinyl. So obviously we understand if someone's in America, they don't want to pay for shipping from Europe, they should buy the vinyl there. Yeah. But for the other bits and pieces, all the CDs, it's a bit more reasonable. It's just tricky with an LP-sized object. Yeah,
and it's 180-gram vinyl too, so it's tricky to mail that outside Europe.
But you say it's like, it's interesting. You mentioned Rob and Ben, obviously, from Epic 45 earlier, and they've had a few times where someone's gone to buy a vinyl and gone, oh, this postage is too expensive, and sent them quite a harsh email. And when they've explained, oh, this is us, the band, who are doing this, we walk to the local post office, lots of the time the people are like, oh, I'm so sorry, and bought it anyway because they're dealing with the band,
Yeah, I think Bandcamp is kind of interesting one for maybe more casual listeners, because they're perhaps not aware that it's the band. They might think it's still going through a label or something, and most times you're dealing directly with the band. So if you send a little message to them, I really like the record or something, the person who reads it is the person who made it. Whereas if you're dealing with a record store somewhere, like an indie record store or something, and you send them an email, it's whoever works there. So it's a different model, and I think dedicated music fans particularly like it, but I can understand for more casual sort of listeners, this idea of suddenly dealing with the band direct might be a bit strange. It's like, really? You guys are the one doing, all the posting and stuff? Like, oh, okay. But, but I think people seem to like it. They like sending all messages and having a chat.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. I think, and when they realise that, sometimes they're like, "Oh, can you sign it for me?" So,
happy to do that.
But I like that kind of direct connection, because I much prefer to hear how a song or some music that you made impacted someone's life or made their day a little bit better than a kind of hoity-toity kind of review. Do you know what I mean? Like, I much prefer that everyday real life. It's like, oh, cool, that person loves listening to that record on their way to work on the bus, in the morning to get through the week or whatever. That means more to me.
Yeah. It's like I sent you a message on Instagram because Elk was in my top played of 2020 on Spotify. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll send that, because then, like you say, I'd sending it direct to someone that's in the band and go, look, I played your song enough on Spotify that it ended up in my...
That's always really nice to hear. It's always really nice to receive little messages like that. And I mean, and going back to the previous question, releasing an album yourself, one of the nice parts of doing it yourself is that part of that experience becomes that sort of feedback loop that you get that you just wouldn't have, under previous kind of models of the industry or whatever, where you sort of put something new out and then sort of gradually over the weeks and months after, you start to hear little things back from people. And or you see it online even, you might see it on Instagram, for example. You see people posting pictures of whatever they've just bought, or I saw a guy in Japan the other day who bought the cassette, and I thought, that's pretty cool. It's like, so it's nice to see that sort of stuff too.
Yeah, there was this guy the other day on Instagram who had all our CDs except one, and I couldn't help it. I posted him just to surprising. So it's fun to do little, like, just to complete this. So it's fun to do little things like that every now and then.
He had literally everything but one. That's quite strange. But he'd obviously been such a big supporter of the music. It sort of it felt like just a nice way to say thank you, to send him the one that he was missing. So
that's really sweet.
He seemed to be pretty happy about it. That's a nice message. So it was quite funny. I was looking at his photo. I thought, hang on, he's missing one here. We can help him out with this problem.
I know where he lives.
It's true.
Excellent. So the Bandcamp, what's the Bandcamp address? If we're on
just heligoland.bandcamp.com, I think.
Yep.
And This Quiet Fire, the new one, is just front and center.
Yeah,
excellent.
It should be the first thing you see. Yeah.
I'll put all the links below for people to click on, make it easy for people. But before I say my goodbyes, on a personal note, Rob from Epic 45 told me to say hello to you and hello to the cats.
Lovely.
And
pass that on to the cats.
Pass on as well.
And then I was talking to an American hip-hop producer the other day, and he asked who I was interviewing next. And so I sent him a link to your album, and he described it as, let's see. It's nice, don't worry. This is fucking dope. So I thought, I wonder if their music's ever been described like that before.
Probably not. I wouldn't think so. I'm okay with that. It sounded like he enjoyed it, so that's the main thing.
That's cute. That's cute.
But Karen, Steve, thank you ever so much for talking to me, and I genuinely recommend people go out and listen to the new album. You know, it's beautiful. You know, it really is.
Well, thanks so much for having us. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and have a chat.
Yeah.
You have to polish yourself, Mark.